is Mr. Patrick McCarthy. Mr. McCarthy is a accomplished senior executive and licensed attorney. He's also a co-founder of Valid Care, which provide contract research outsourcing and virtual research solutions for life science and consumer packaged good industries. Valid Care has worked actively in the hemp space, advancing to advance science and research since 2017. Today, he will give us a talk. The title is Answering FDA's Call for CBD Safety Data. And Patrick, so now you may share your screen.
Great, thank you, Jinping. And thank you, Norbert and team, for hosting us. Very, very happy to be here. Let me just confirm with you, you can see my screen there.
Yes, I can see your screen.
You can, yes?
Yes, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it's a virtual homecoming for me, being a native of Detroit and 3 of my 11 siblings being Michigan State grads. I was sad to hear that there's no longer the Fraggle Bagel on Grand River, so the toxicity department at MSU is doing its job and helping us all get away from deep fried bagels, but would have loved to have been back in East Lansing for this, but thank you so much for having us. Really important topic and fantastic symposium thus far on the safety of CBD. We're happy to play our role as Valid Care, and as Jinping mentioned, we help lead research to fuel healthier generations at Valid Care. We're working with pharma, with supplements, with nutritionals, but since 2017, we've been very actively involved in the hemp and cannabis space. As a company, we believe that there's a health advocate in each of us and that there's an actual healthcare revolution going on from consumer health. And with that, our charter is really to unleash insights from global communities, whether they're patients or consumers, to capture data from real world evidence so that we can apply it to build or to allow companies to bring greater products to market, whether it be food, drug, medical products. So with that, that's who we are as Valid Care. Our experience comes from traditional healthcare, where we worked in a number of different venues. My last role was with 2 different orthopedics companies, running those nationally, but capturing data again from end users and bringing that into virtual care and into science to advance clinical outcomes. So here, as we look at the use of real world evidence, we see there's an opportunity to better understand what's going on in the CBD space. As I think we're all aware, and this may be the most basic slide of the week, we've got a plant that looks very much the same to the human eye. And as of 2018's Farm Bill, we have hemp now being reclassified as something other than a Schedule I drug. It's not been said that it's not a drug, it's just no longer scheduled. And so from the FDA's perspective, or even if we look across the pond over at the UK or EU with their FSA, they have a challenge to take on what we know to be a molecule called cannabidiol that's derived from what look to be the same plants and in essence are, but for the amount of THC that's natively part of it as a dry weight, and to determine how to handle this. We know the drug route. Epidiolex is well established. We have other cannabis-derived products, as we've heard of this week, whether it's Marinol or others, and they've been scheduled. There has been an observation of liver toxicity, as reviewed this morning by Brad, with Epidiolex, and there's a defined regulatory pathway. That's really, really easy. On the hemp-derived CBD side, we've got a bit of a cart before the horse, where the Farm Bill came through and announced it's no longer scheduled, but did not actually define what hemp is. I love to say in one of my early trips in business, I went over to the UK and I had Pimm's with, I believe it was lemonade. And I continued to ask what Pimm's was. And folks would say, it's refreshing, it's delightful, it's this, it's that. And I was like, is it alcohol or is it not? And ultimately understood it's alcohol. But to me, hemp is in that, hemp-derived CBD is in that what is it phase. And so with that, our government and other governments really need help with that. what we've heard from FDA to date is that they are reviewing all regulatory pathways, and that while many manufacturers or product companies have applied for GRAS or have presented their self-GRAS, the government's saying that's not enough. There aren't enough experts in this yet to actually allow GRAS to happen. So an NDI route is not there yet. They've also communicated to us that they have concerns around liver toxicity, in large part from the Epidiolex data, as well as drowsiness, and to Brad's comments this morning, some concerns over impact of gonadal size and other things with reproductive rates in animals seen to date. So with that, FDA has made pretty clear through their last letter to Congress that they need answers to this in order to fully figure out a regulatory path, or paths plurally. And with that, we see that there's an opportunity for us to help. So, and I'll play this here. For those of you that don't know Dr. Abernethy, she's one of the co-chairs of the Cannabis Work Group. And here's a small clip that she gave last year at the Senate hearing in terms of FDA's action.
We lack the information for science-based decision-making about CBD. So what is the FDA doing to address this situation? First, we are moving as quickly as possible to learn what is known and develop a work plan to fill in the gaps. We have formed a working group, which I co-chair, to expedite FDA's work. We are reviewing the published medical literature, all databases available to us, and any available information from industry sponsors. On May 31st, we held a full-day hearing with over 100 speakers and 2,000 participants. A public docket just closed on July 16th, and we received 4,492 comments. We are meeting with our federal partners, state governments, trade organizations, patient groups, and others. Throughout, we have asked for any available data that's already available. Please send it to us.
Great, I hope that volume came through. So with Dr. Abernethy's request and the other public requests prior, we did as a company submit the data that we had collected over 18 months in terms of actual consumer use of cannabis-derived products, in terms of rationale for why they used something, how much they used, and any adverse effects, as well as what we call just other benefits, so perceived benefits by the users. What we saw in that initial tranche of data that was shared with them back in July of 19 was about a 3% adverse event reported rate, and typically it had something to do with the scratchy throat or GI distress. Otherwise, there were no self-reported issues. But as we heard through FDA's request last year around liver safety, that data is not enough and they need more. And so last year we were able to meet with Dr. Abernethy and team and come forward and ask them exactly what do you need? What types of things are you looking for to better evaluate CBD as a compound, not as a specific product, but to help the regulatory path. This is an interesting game we're playing where we know individual products can go down the IND path and be a drug, and yet there are thousands of commercial products on the market today treating themselves either as a supplement or as a botanical or something which is completely non-regulated. And FDA has a concern that there may be a public health issue today. So with that, we asked, what could we do to help? And they shared with us that if we could bring forward information on use of those products, those which are being commercially utilized today, that would be helpful. And so in great collaboration with them, and they gave us a ton of feedback on exactly what they would like, we were able to put together a protocol to run an observational decentralized study with 12 different brands participating. We interviewed over 135 brands and 12 stepped forward to fund this, where we have adult consumers attesting to consuming at least a CBD for at least 30 days prior to study, and then 30 days during the trial, they actually journal exactly what they're taking and then subject themselves for a blood draw at the end of the cumulative 60 days. Now that's a minimum of 60 days. Many of these consumers have been taking CBD for a long, long time. So at a minimum, we have a 60-day window. For full transparency, a perfect study from FDA's perspective was baseline plus 18 months with 18 blood draws once a month from each of these subjects. That was neither economically feasible, nor was it feasible logistically in order to get human subjects to do that with what and where we were in the population we're serving. But we're proud to see that we have been able to put together this study that will give us a baseline, and we believe that this will be instructive as to where we should look next for toxicity and other things that are going on. All that said, the primary measure here in this study is to look at ALT, although we are also capturing AST, ALP, and bilirubin, and those will be secondary measures. We know that typical population has about a 2.5% elevation of ALT. So we're looking to see for a deviation of another 2%. So if we see 4.5% or more of the population has elevation, that's where we start digging into the data to see exactly what's going on there. Now, each of these participants are healthy adults, somewhere between 18 and 75 years of age. The exclusions are those which you would expect would be typical in terms of pregnant or known liver disease, any immunotherapy or anticonvulsants. Unlike what Brad spoke about this morning, we did take out anticonvulsants, as we know that's a complicated measure, and other contraindicated drug-to-drug interaction type products that we would know in there. In the last 7 days prior to any blood draw, we do ask folks to track any and all alcohol consumption so we can see if that is a measure. And then there's a full medical history that's captured on each of these participants. To date, we've not seen any product-related adverse events. We have had a few pregnancies and had the typical dropouts that you would expect, but we've got over 1,000 people enrolled. Over 500 have completed their blood tests or blood draws. And we continue to move forward with an expectation that the trial will be done by year end. The products that are involved here are 100% oral forms. So whether it's a tablet or capsule or tincture, those are most of the forms we're seeing. And the composition ranges from a full spectrum to an isolate, and we even have a couple water-soluble nanotechnologies in here. So it'll be very, very interesting to see the performance of any and all of those products. The consumption amount is left strictly up to the participant. If we dictated, it would take us down to an IND route. And so with this being observational, we're really looking at very much real world population health. Do we have an issue? If so, what population and among what products and or what methods and or practices in terms of how they are taking the products. So be very, very interested to see. It all starts with that primary measure of ALT as we finish up at end of year. And hopefully this data, once collected, will give FDA enough, in combination with other research that's presented here, will give them enough data so that they can start determining what path or multiple paths that the product can safely be used. All that said, we know a number of the brands are also using this data to work with the FSA in the UK. For those not familiar, novel foods applications are being taken in through a dossier by end of year. And the UK has recently asked for brands that are coming over to fill what they're calling the safety gap in terms of data around toxicity. So a number will be able to take their data and bring it there. The data that is collected here will be shared with FDA and each of the brands on the safety level. And so hopefully FDA can move forward. Each of the brands will have their own data and aggregate de-identified information on the rest of the brands. With that said, we are, as a secondary measure, looking at drowsiness as well as the impact on male testosterone levels. So if someone reports they're drowsy through the through the time frame here, they'll be asked once a week for each of the 4 weeks to complete a Stanford sleep scale. And with that, we'll be able to bring that information forward both to FDA and brands as well. And then among male participants, due to the recent studies in the rodent population, we thought it'd be very interesting to at least see, is there some sort of deviation from normal in terms of testosterone levels in males that would indicate that there's something with sexual function here or metabolism that we need to be concentrated with. That definitely will not come to any firm conclusion, but it would at least give us directionally some understanding as to where we need to dig. So with that, as you look at other insights and areas for additional research, we're understanding medical history and demographics in male and female. We're looking at adverse events, product source, composition. Each product comes through with its own COA from the manufacturer, and then we are doing our own COA with a third-party lab to see and make certain that the label does match the composition within. That too has been a very interesting area for FDA's focus as of late. And then with that, we're also capturing the rationale for use and any reported effects, good or bad, as well as product preferences. So part of our capture here, the majority of it goes toward regulatory, but we also understand that the product companies that have put forward the funding for this and have products in market need to better understand rationale for use and who their consumers are and why it's being used. That's also informative for a number of CPG and life sciences companies that are standing on the sideline until they get safety and use information. And with that, we've reserved right to any and all of that information so we can make it available. Proud to announce here are the brands that are participating and are sponsoring this research in the middle of a pandemic and in a market that has frankly come close to collapsing over the past year. These 12 companies put significant financial and operational resources forward and have done what it's taken to make certain that their products meet the lot specific guidance that we've had for the science. So can't say enough about each of these brands and how they've taken the responsibility to bear the burden for industry to come forward. As I mentioned earlier, about 140 companies were interviewed, and through this, we were able to crowdsource this research. So thank you to all of these great leaders. That said, as I mentioned, we will share the data with FDA. We expect this to happen close to end of year, really maybe into the beginning of first quarter next year. The outcomes for safety will be published in a peer-reviewed journal. Dr. Aqua and Dr. Lombardo are interviewing those publications now, and then we will have this data available for license back to industry and a detailed aggregate de-identified data so that folks that are doing diligence to figure out whether to come into market or not can have better science to work with. With that, I will pause for questions. I hope I didn't overuse up my time there, Jim Peng, but appreciate the opportunity to share what we're up to here and very excited to share our results shortly.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. This is a very, very nice talk. I believe we have time for one question. I saw a question coming from the Q&A ask about, will the industry-sponsored study lean more toward sublingual oils or that are absorbed or towards edibles that are swallowed and undergo first-pass metabolism?
That's a great question. So the majority of products, so over 50%, are some sort of a tincture or oil. But with that, some are actually water-soluble nanotechnology, so they may be metabolized differently, but there are 2 or 3 capsules in there and 1 to 2 edibles, but majority will be the tincture or oil.
Great. I guess we have time for another question. I do have a question that regarding the study design. Is the study design that take into consideration of confounding factors such as those participants who might be also a regular cannabis user?
Yes, so that's a great question. Regular cannabis users have actually been excluded from the study due to the confounding nature with that, which actually gave us a higher exclusion rate than we expected on the front side. But it's a terrific question, and something we actually battled with quite a bit, but we wanted to make certain that we were just measuring one defined compound here and not bringing in the compounding complexities. But great area for secondary research.
All right. So a follow-up question is that, do you have any like measurement that along the study that you can measure the internal dose of the CBD just to make sure that what they're taking is what they're claiming, some sort of control for that?
So in terms from a PK study perspective, are we asking, or is this just?
Yeah, something like that kind of nature.
Yeah, so not in this study. This is strictly observational, all done remotely. And so we're relying on real world evidence and personal attestations of each of the consumers. So metabolism thereafter becomes a second level. Really, this is about safety first, and everything else becomes interesting. But the safety of the elevation of ALTs is